welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being with us today. Today's conversation gets a little political, and my friend Anne Ortelee and I are going to be talking about the US presidential election. We're going to circle back to last week and talk about the debate, the US presidential debate, and then we're going to talk about what that means in relation to the overarching picture of Pluto moving into Aquarius and the US Pluto return. And we're even going to talk a little bit about the election, the upcoming election. So get comfortable, pour yourself a nice cup of tea, a cup of coffee, sit down, because we are going to get into the political landscape in our country. And there are some hopeful messages. Also, I just wanted to give you a little heads up and give a brief trigger warning that we do talk about some sensitive topics related to reproductive rights, related to sexual abuse, and things in the context of Pluto as it moves through different signs. So if you are sensitive to those kinds of subjects, please know that there's a little heads up about that. Before we dive into the show, I have two things. First of all, I want to just remind you that I will be at the Omega Institute in September, from September 2nd through 6th, for a workshop, Modern Day Magic workshop, Own Your Power and Shape Your Life. And it is going to be a week full of self-reflection, of personal healing, and also of really accessing and owning your spiritual gifts and your spiritual power. So that's happening this September. And the other piece of business that I wanted to talk about is because Anne and I teach this course, the Relationships in Astrology course, we have a third level coming up in October. And so go to relationshipsandastrology.com and you can find out more about that. Now to our show. And I want to just introduce you to Anne. Anne, if you are into astrology, Anne needs no introduction. She is one of the most recognized, celebrated astrologers of our time. And she's also one of the most prolific. Anne has a podcast. She has a Patreon page and does regular updates on X, formerly known as Twitter. She is always ahead of what's happening astrologically. And she is a storyteller. She's a teacher. She is a gifted astrologer. I've had the opportunity to sit with her and have a reading with her. And I've also had the opportunity to learn from her and to teach with her. So I can't say enough positive things about her. And she also has a hilarious sense of humor. So you will get to see what I'm talking about when I bring her on in just a second. So take a deep breath. We're getting ready to talk politics. And please join me in welcoming Anne to the show. Welcome, Anne. I'm so excited to have you on the show and to talk politics with you.
Politics. Woo!
Yes.
Our Aquarian planets are singing and dancing. And our Venus and Scorpios are.
Yeah, it is. So, I think the one thing that is on everyone's mind, I think everyone's probably tired of talking about the debate. We've heard about it ad nauseum. But, what we aren't hearing is an astrological take on the debate. And so I thought we could start with just looking at the debate itself and then get into the nitty-gritty of this campaign and this election and where we might be going with American politics.
Adventure journey we can go on together. It sounds good. Because if we get scared, we can go, Rachel, you're scared? I go, I am, Anne. And I'll go, I'm scared too. Okay, let's hold hands. And we can be brave together. Because that's part of what it's a Pluto transit.
Yeah.
We're having a Pluto transit. So part of a Pluto transit is like we do this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. We get into the weeds, we get into power dynamics, we get into, oh my God, what's happening? And we go, wow, how can this be going on? And that's Pluto. For all of us that have had Pluto, and the United States is having a Pluto return.
Yeah.
So that's part of our story here, is understanding the Lord of the underworld, who's all about power and control, rising up. And we had it to the Capricorn planets, but because the United States is so old, we now have our progressed Pluto in Aquarius. So now we have to have the Pluto on the Aquarian planets, which is how does the community respond to what's happening? And that's where that's our magic, where we're going to be working in this conversation today. Like, what do? We know we're having a Pluto transit. And as my astrology teacher, John Marcuselli, used to say, you can run, but you can't hide.
You can't. I know, because Pluto loves to dig into the underworld, as you said, and look at what isn't being seen, what may be being hidden intentionally. And also, I always equate Pluto to the dentist. You know, you go into the dentist and there you identify all the decay. And you have to clear out the decay before you can really get any, crowns or, moldings or anything like that. Before you can do the cosmetics, you actually have to go and scoop out what's damaging and what's dying. And
you think about those little picks where they dig away and there's blood and gook and you have stuff on your neck. But that's Pluto.
Yeah.
And any good dental hygienist has a lot of Scorpio in their chart. Where they're like, let's go in and clean it out, and that's what Pluto does. Ready or not, willing or not, we're going to show you stuff, and then you have to figure out how you want to respond.
So there are some people who listen to my show who aren't astrologers or into astrology. And so just to give some context, the Pluto return happens every 248 years, correct? It's when Pluto comes back to the same place it was at the birth of our country. And so it's a very big turning point that we've been in for a couple of years. Is there anything more that you want to say about the Pluto return as it relates to this election, as it relates to what we're seeing politically?
Sure. Well, I think part of what we want to remember with Pluto is when he arrives, he says, come with me. And he looks kind of friendly and you kind of go, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. And then as you're going along, he's a little like Tony Soprano. And you're kind of like, whoa, like, what did you just do? And then you get a little, and you're like, whoa, now some people love the power because Pluto is power. And some people are respectful of it. But what happens with Pluto is we get into triangles, you, another person, a third person, you, another person, a third thing. And more importantly, we go through a big metamorphosis and a transformation. So if we think of when Pluto was discovered, it was discovered in the 1930s. As we were inventing atomic power. And we were talking consciousness. Freud, Jung, like understand your psyche, understand what's going on inside of you. And when he was discovered, we all went, oh, okay, he was discovered during Pluto in Cancer, 125, halfway through the cycle, right, of 250 years, 48 years. So what he does is he goes into a sign and he basically, the first third, he rotor-rooters the sign. Then the second third, he goes, okay, we're going to really put some structures in place to transform it. And then the third version, the third part of the sign, he's like, okay, it's broken. How do we fix it? So we've all gone through Pluto transits. So we had the AIDS epidemic, Pluto and Scorpio. Scorpio rules sex and partnerships. We had the AIDS crisis. Then it seemed like everybody in the world was dying. And then we started to solve it. We had Pluto in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is power in publishing. You went into that in spring of 95. We used to have phone books. We used to have magazines. But we got the internet in 95. And suddenly everything's online. 100, 200, 500 years ago, the Gutenberg printing press was invented. And everybody was like, oh, great. And then when Pluto went into Aquarius 500 years ago, they were like, don't go printing the Bible in English. We don't want people knowing the Bible. We don't want people thinking. What do we have now? We have book bans. But we have Pluto and Sag, which said we're going to talk to you about publishing and communication. And of course, in the 90s, Bill Clinton signed that communication law, which allowed people to own a lot of power in how they communicate. And we have social media with all the algorithms. But it also brought to light Sagittarius was priests and the sex abuse. Pluto in Scorpio was rape, and rape is power. It's not about sex or asking for it, violence. And if you remember the Bill Cosby women that were drugged, they all said there wasn't a term called date rape then.
Right.
I thought I did it.
Yes.
So what he does is he brings things up and has us see them. And then we go through this maelstrom. And then we figure out what is happening next. So Pluto and Capricorn, government, corporations, power of the structures that run us. So all of those, if there's any kind of corruption like there was in the Catholic Church, or there was in the government not taking care of the AIDS people and all this, that was when we got into sex abuse and like people being abused sexually, like suddenly everybody was abused sexually. Well, it's been happening forever, but nobody talked about it. So now we're in Capricorn. We're looking at the structures of trying to control things. So we see the Supreme Court justices getting bribed at, $4 million to Clarence. And we also see the government shifting and giving power dynamics, taking away our powers as individuals and controlling us. Pluto's and Capricorn's a control sign, but also saying, okay, we're going to go through this big transformation. Now, what we look at is what space it's in. So the part we're in now is the fixing the things that are broken. And I can't tell you a single person I know that says it's all a little bit broken. And Pluto and Capricorn says you got to fix the broken stuff. You're going to glue it. You're going to throw it out. What are you going to do with it? When he goes into Aquarius, he says, hey, people, you got to go do something about this. You got to get the community together. Are we going to build it? Are we going to tear it down? What are we going to do to make it better? But he's dancing between these two. So we don't have an answer yet, but we know the next step is as a community, we have to step forward. Back 1777, we had the American Revolution. We had the French Revolution. We changed the governments. I did a lecture at NORWAC, and I did it on the Pluto return. And a guy came up to me after, and he goes, Anne, your country has already had a Pluto return. I said, really? He goes, yes. And if you remember, there was a great book published a while back, which is now being banned in bookstores, in libraries, the 1619 Project, which was when the first slaves came to America.
Yes.
And the Civil War was the Pluto return of the 1619 slave ships. And so then we, quote unquote, abolished slavery. Right? We're now having the Pluto return of the old white guys who owned land, who owned people, who owned women. We were chattel back then. And we're having the Pluto return of them. And let me tell you, people don't go down without a fight.
Yeah, it's true.
But the change is inevitable. It's happening. And so our job is to be like, hey, old white guy, no offense to the old white guys in the audience, what are you doing? You got to share a little, big guy. You don't get to run everything. You don't get to control everything anymore. So that's part of it too. It's understanding it is inevitable change. And if you think about the area of your life that's changed significantly from 2008, when we had the first Black president elected in the United States. I mean, we're not up to women yet because, a little sexist, a little racist, a little misogynist, but we had a Black president elected in 2008. That was when Pluto went into Capricorn.
That's right.
And so there's hope, but we also have to know, hey, we all got jobs to do. This.
Yeah. One thing that's been interesting too with you talked about Capricorn being government, being power structures. One thing that I think has been interesting too, since 2008, is the way that that corporations, large moneyed interests, and government and politics and power all congeal and come together. Like the meeting point between those seems to be where Pluto still has some work to do. And, and if you use the Sibley chart, the US Sibley chart, which is one chart that many of us use, our country's Pluto is in the second house, which relates to our values and our financial interests, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about that convergence of power, money, and politics?
Yeah, well, it's a couple things. One, when they passed, we have the Heritage Foundation, which has been very much actively working towards the unitary executive branch since the Reagan years, and also working on appointing judges, very conservative judges. But they also have an approach where they say, hey, we want to run things. So if we're going to run things, corporations are like people. So they can spend as much money as they want in an election. Dark money, it's called Citizens United. Just set up those super PACs, throw the money in there. And I'm kind of like, okay, so if you are like people and you're going to throw money in the pot, then you all have to die at 80. and sell everything you own and pay tax on it, because you're not a person, you're a corporation. But we've given corporations the power, actually more power, because I certainly don't have $1 million. Or, we had a congressional run in New York. They spent $25 million to unelect one of the progressive Democrats and put in a conservative, center corporate Democrat, basically, someone who takes money from corporations. So a lot of the younger ones have been saying, I don't take money from PACs, but they then rely on us, the people, to give them money. But we also see the corporations uniting with the judges. They've been taking Clarence Thomas. They sent his nephew to school. They bought his mother. They've been doing that for years. We're just finding out about it now.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do about it? And so our job is to know this stuff gets exposed. And you remember with the pedophile priests, I was kind of involved in that because I was Catholic. And it seemed like every priest was abusing children. Well, no. They were transferring them around. There were a lot of good priests, but it really did a ding to the Catholic Church. The Pluto in Scorpio was, there's a great book out by Dr. Fauci now. That was when he came of age, was fighting for the AIDS epidemic, because all these people were dying and nobody cared because they were gay. And it's okay if they die. And they were like, it's not okay if we die. We want to act up. And they did. They changed it. So the goal is we have to act up and get it going. And we do, as Pluto in Aquarius, American Revolution, French Revolution. I certainly don't want a guillotine in front of the Met, like it was in front of the Louvre. But we have this energy of how are we going to change this structure and look at the people that are trying to control things and say, hey, but there is this unholy alliance. Or there is an alliance. I'm not going to call it unholy. It's formed. Back in 2000, John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh argued Bush versus Gore in front of the Supreme Court. They stopped the counting in Florida. They gave the race to Bush. Right? The Supreme Court ruled. It wasn't the Electoral College. So now 20 years later, we have it again, this whole fighting about it. But we also those guys are now in the Supreme Court. And today today's Monday, July 1st, they just issued a rule saying Trump has immunity for what he does. So I'm like, really? Come on. Like, no.
I know.
No.
I know.
We have to honor that what happens when you're at the edge of a Pluto return, like when we look at Biden in the debate, and they go, democracy is frail, democracy is falling apart. Democracy is being held up by an 81-year-old guy.
Right.
All the rest of us have to go help.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is we're being presented that, remember a country and a company, if you've worked in sales or in business, companies are shaped by the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a crazy autocrat in lying, cheating on his wife, paying a hush, but throwing an insurrection party, that guy. And then we have the old guy. And then we have the guy with the worm that ate his friend. And out of 330 million people, these are the three. But I go, what we're looking at is democracy is fragile. Well, we got a fragile little guy trying to defend democracy. It's on all of us. Pluto in Aquarius says it's on all of us to defend it.
Right. Oh, I love that.
Together as a group and say, no. What are you doing? What are you giving him immunity for? We all have to follow the law. So, but when they picked the debate chart, which is what we ostensibly started here, the rising sign for that chart is Capricorn, which is old people. So Pluto's in. Ceres, which is the parent energy, is out of bounds in Capricorn. So he looked really old. We had Venus out of bounds in Cancer, opposite it, right? So Venus is communication. And we had this power struggle that we got to witness of this debate and say, okay, like, wow, the old guy's old.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's part of us coming aware and saying, now what are we going to do about it?
Right. And, I think I'm going to go back to the debate chart in just a second, but I think it's really interesting, given everything that we're talking about so far, that the election is taking place with Pluto in Capricorn, and the inauguration is going to happen with Pluto in Aquarius. So, I mean, do you foresee the next few months while Pluto is moving backwards? Pluto is going to be in Capricorn from September 1st to November 19th. I mean, do you think that is really Pluto coming in to do its last work at remedying some of these Capricorn systems?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we also need him to get 2 degrees off for us to figure out what he did.
So we're going to come back to the election. We're going to come back to that. But let's take a look at this debate chart. And I have it right here that I can pull up for anyone watching.
The thing to remember was there's 5 planets out of bounds in the sky during the debate. One was the Ceres is out of bounds, which is the old guy, and being aware of elderliness. And then the Venus was out of bounds, which is what direction are we heading in and what do we love? And Mercury was out of bounds, and Mercury was out of bounds in Cancer. So when a planet is out of bounds, it behaves a little wild. So you tuned in and you went, wow, this is really wild, what I'm watching here. And then also Pallas Athena, which is the strategy, was out of bounds. And we also had the strategy opposite Uranus. So the idea was, well, we're going to do this early, right? And so it'll show some stuff. And then we also look at out of bounds planets behave wildly. They are not controllable. So as I said to Rachel when we first talked about this, I said, well, clearly they did not have an astrologer. One of the reasons Reagan was so successful was Nancy had an astrologer, Joan Quigley, who wrote a great book. And Ronnie would say to Nancy, what did Joan say? Right. And so a lot of the big events were Joan said, do it here. Right. So they didn't do that with this.
No,
so
they did not.
They did not do this. So they have this out of bounds planets, which means unexpected results.
Yeah.
Plus they had planets on world points, which meant everybody would see it.
Right.
And one of them was Jupiter in Gemini, which was double versions, double stories out of bound or on the world point. Mercury was on the world point. The communication was a little garbled and a little hard to understand. And Neptune, which is the planet of illusion and delusion, was on a world point.
Right.
So our illusions were changed.
Yeah.
Very dramatically.
Right.
And we also had our partnership planet. There was another one. We also had our partnership planet out of bounds. So we went, wow, what's going on? So that's the backdrop. And then the other thing they did, there's a kind of thing called besieged, which is when planets are trapped between mean planets, kind of like besieged in the castle. You know, thinking that they would, they're besieged. So on the day of the time of the debate, the moon in Pisces, which is a very sensitive, emotional moon, that's why everybody had such big emotions, was trapped between, besieged by Saturn, the planet of old, decrepit, fallen apart structures, and Neptune, the planet of illusion and delusion and depression. And, you know, like when the lights go on at the end of the thing and you go, oh my God, what am I seeing? So, and Saturn, Neptune is also about dissolving the structures.
Right.
So we're all seeing a lot, and think about in your own lives, how many structures are dissolving and changing and leaving. And the moon was trapped. The moon is the public. Yes. We were trapped there going, oh my God, my structures dissolve, which is why everybody went so wild. Like,
right.
And that's okay. That, I mean, if you're going to pick a chart to get everybody excited, this was a great chart to do it with. If you're going to pick a chart to calm people down, not happening with this chart.
No. No, and I'm aware too of the fact that that the Mars for the debate night was opposite Biden's Mars as well. Yeah. And so, you know, a lot of these transits that you're talking about didn't really do him, in addition to just being hard and affecting us in the ways that you so beautifully articulated, they also show a lot of instability for him and a lot of attack that is hard to come back from, hard to bounce back from.
That level of
yeah.
And, you know, when you think about it, you know, when I'm doing my Venus and Scorpio conspiracy theory thing, which, you know, Venus, you know, because it was, you know, it was like a couple days in and everybody's jumping and yelling and screaming. And I'm like, I wonder if they scheduled that debate to show us him early enough so we can change it.
Yes. Yes.
Is that why they did it? Because they broke with the tradition, they broke with history, they set up a debate format. Because I kept sitting there yelling at the camera, get him on a good angle. And they said, well, they put him on the right side of the stage, so he always looked like he was looking down, when in fact he was looking at the questioners. But if he was on the left side of the stage, it would have been a good shot like Trump was. But, Biden was like head down and he was kind of looking off into the distance, but that was because of where he was positioned on the stage. So I'm like, they did that on purpose to get everybody all riled up. In my, like what was that really for? And, I don't know that they did, and I don't know it was that conscious, but that is what it showed us. And so one of the things that I love about astrology is you don't always know. You look at the energy and you go, wow, moon's besieged. That's the public. We're besieged.
Yes.
But also...
oh, wait, again, we're besieged by the old guy and the liar. Neptune being deception.
Totally. Trapped between the two. Yeah. But it's our image of what democracy is. Everybody goes, democracy is fragile. Democracy is fragile. We got a fragile guy running it.
Yeah.
Not to say he's not good, but he's also 58 years in office. And that is his second Saturn return. Right? Everybody has their purpose. And we have to think of Trump, because the way his chart lands on the Sibley chart, he's on our Mars. He is supposed to get us all pissed off and divided. And that is what he does.
Yep. It
and
is.
He's a Gemini. He's a Gemini. So not all Geminis lie. I want to just say that. But a lot of them have interesting approaches to the truth. As a Virgo. Virgos, what was your version of the truth? No. Come on.
They're storytellers. They know how to frame things in a way that's going to captivate an audience. It's going to tell a story.
Going to tell a story and get you to go along on the ride. Yeah.
So let's look at anything else that you want to say about the debate chart, or about the way that it falls in Trump's chart.
Well, the way it fell in his, to him running around, jumping and yelling and saying, I won. People were like, yeah, you won if you're a liar. But, technically everybody deemed him the winner. And we have this whole thing about winning. And I think what the Saturn and Neptune are saying to us, because they both stopped, like right now. Saturn was Saturday, Neptune is now, as they came out with this immunity decision from the Supreme Court. But those planets are going to go back till November 12th and 20th and 15th, I think. So they're going to be past the election date. So we'll see as they go back now, what are they going to say as we, kind of ride the backwards journey? Think of it as the film breaks. You remember the old days, a whole movie, and you watch it and it breaks, and then you go back, put it in, and then you run the movie again. So we're going backwards until November. And then we're going to be like, oh, okay, where are we going? So part of it is us, having a need. We, as Pluto and Aquarius, as a community, we have to say what we want. What is right for us? Why is that right for us? And what is that about? And I think that's the important conversation. What kind of country do we want? We're having the Pluto return. Back in 1776, we said we didn't want a king. And now we're saying, well, some of us are saying they want a king. They want a dictator. That's good for them. And I'm like, really? Okay. I don't want a king telling me what to do. So, but we're also entering the time of the American Revolution, where we revolted against the king.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe we're going to revolt against democracy. Or, as Pluto transits often do, they make us stronger, and we lean in. When we're finished with the Pluto transit, we say, I never want to go through that again. But boy, did I learn a lot. Because all of the Trump years, I kept going, I thought there was a rule about that. And all it was an accepted norm. It wasn't a rule.
Wow.
And now, like, wow, those are our norms. Those are our rules. What is it? And then the other question is, do I want that as an example for my kids and my grandchildren? Is that the kind of country I want to live in? And I think it's important because of the violent component. There's a subtext of violence here, which of course was the Civil War too. But the violent component, I have a friend, Joanne, and lives on Long Island, and knew Germans who lived through the Hitler years. And they said, we knew what was going on, but we were so afraid of the thugs and the people that would hurt us that we didn't stop it. And so that's part of the journey here is, the threatening. So when they were trying to elect Jim Jordan and the Republicans that weren't voting for him for speaker were getting the death threats, they were saying things to the other ones and they were like, well, vote for him and you won't get the death threats anymore. And so the threat of violence with our country, with guns all over the place, is pretty strong. But we also have to say, hey, what kind of country do we want to live in? And we have to hold that vision strong. The other thing to remember in this debate, there is no fire in the chart.
Right.
No planets are in fire. It's all in water and earth.
Right.
So there's no vision. We didn't emerge from the debate with a vision.
Yeah, that I kept on saying that the whole time is nobody's talking about the vision for what we could be. And that I think that we have a real opportunity with Neptune at the 29th degree, with Saturn moving through Pisces, both of them meeting up in Aries in 2026. We need to be visioning now. Like that's the opportunity that we have because we're entering a whole new paradigm.
Yes, totally. Yeah. And there are 5 outer planets changing signs, which is very rare. Plus the node of fate is resetting on a 0 Aries point, first week in January. It's resetting everybody's charts. We have a kind of chart called a soul chart, a draconic chart, which is the soul of our being. We have our natal, but the draconic chart is the soul. So when the nodes get to 0 Aries, everybody on planet Earth, all of us, we're getting a cosmic reset. Happens every 19 years. And we get a new assignment, plus with the 5 planets, outer planets changing sign. Usually it's maybe 2, but it's never 5.
Right.
And they're all shifting. So they're all bringing in a whole new reality that it's why it feels so unstable and bouncy and not quite clear. But we have to kind of say, what is my vision? So to Rachel's point, what is our vision? We all have one in our chart. We all have a thing we're here to do. We have a purpose. We incarnated to do something. What is your vision of your life? What is your vision of the life for your children? What is the vision of your life for your kids? Do you want to send your kids to school and be afraid they're going to get shot with a bump gun? Do you want to worry about where your kid lives if they get pregnant and they can't get, and there's a problem with pregnant? 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. And they call those things, to get it out, abortions.
Right.
But 25% of the pregnancies have to deal with some way to extract a fetus that is not viable for one reason or another. Not a choosing it, a having to do it. Do we want to ban IVF? What is our vision? Do we want to ban books? What is our vision for what kind of country we want? And I think that's the space rather than the anger, which is another form of fire. So when you see the people so angry, you want to say, wow, that's pretty mad. And I had a therapist at one point who always said to me, anger is a secondary emotion. What's going on underneath there? Where is that anger from?
Yeah.
And when we harness the anger, we harness the mob, which we saw. But when we harness the hope and the love, we have a vision, we have an ideal, we have a purpose. And if we look at the presidents that were truly inspirational, they were people that helped us see our vision.
I love that.
That's what we need, is a vision. And I think Joe Biden has one. I just don't think with his stutter, he's particularly good at talking about it.
Yes.
But he's delivered the vision over the last 3.5 years, but he can't talk about it. So do we have other people talk about it? Do we have other people say what our vision is? We all have to have a vision. We're a part of this community. We got through the Civil War. That's when he said that to me, I went, you're right. We did have a Pluto return for the slavery. We got rid of slavery. It took a while. But it also is, maybe we need a new constitution that says, because the Constitution was written during Pluto and Sag.
Exactly.
And we get rid of the Electoral College, which was a nod to the slave states. And we say, let it be democratically elected.
I think it's interesting. You're right that the what we've seen over the last 4 years leading up to this Pluto return has been a lot of the shadow aspects of our country, including racism, including the slavery and the ways in which so many of our institutions have been built upon slavery. That all of that has been up for our reinterpretation or recreation. And so I don't think you're too far off the base thinking about looking at this Pluto return, the US Pluto return, in relation to the opportunity that we have to revision so many different aspects of our country and to create a new pathway forward that takes the very best of what our foundation is, and that discards the very worst of who we are as a culture.
Because we're evolving. I mean, that's the whole idea. We evolve forward or we evolve backwards. And Pluto returns are times of evolution. And any of you have had an astrology reading, a lot of times you come looking for us when you're having a Pluto transit. You're like, what is going on? But it's triangles where you feel you don't have control. And I always say to people with the Pluto return or a Pluto transit, there's always somebody who has more power that you can appeal to. Find that person. Go to the judge. Go to the therapist. Go to whatever. Well, who has the power in this country that we can go to? Who's the higher power? We, the people.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one thing that was so striking to me when I ran for office, actually, is that when it came down to, to the bare bones of that whole process, it was the people who I knocked on the doors and spoke to, and the people who I interacted with, the voters. And so the people do have the power. And so I think there are different ways that we have power that we don't even realize we have power.
And I think the beauty of the internet, in the same way the Gutenberg printing press let everybody can read the Bible. No, don't read the Bible. So it's also when they say don't read it, I love the Reading Rainbow guy. I'm blanking on his name right now. Lamar Burton. And he's like, read the books that are banned. Those are the good ones. So when someone says, oh, you don't want to know about that, you go, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And honoring our inquisitiveness, honoring that we're all here on Earth right now to go through this together as a team. And our job is to say, what is our team's vision? How are we going to coalesce? What do we want for our people, our children? And, a lot of times the public is there before the government is. You have to have the public behind it to get things done. And so that idea of what, 70% of the public thinks women should be able to access healthcare. 80% think there should be background checks on guns. Not saying you can't have a gun, but let's make sure I need a driver's license to drive a car. I should maybe need a license to own a gun, or at least, think about it. And so it's understanding the public is there before the government gets there. So that's the other thing. Get rid of the people that aren't doing the work. And part of it is looking at them and saying, well, what did you vote for? And how have you helped me? And if you haven't, I'm not going to vote for you. And your one voice is one vote, but everybody else has a vote too. And that's where we have that democracy thing that is so nice. Because the other part of it is, if we look at what the public has elected, Hillary won, Biden won, they won the popular vote. But with the Electoral College, which is a legacy of slavery that was put in in the Constitution to get the Southern states to agree to it, hey, do we need it anymore? Can't we do one? Because, we've changed how people are elected over time. It used to be the senators were elected by the state, and we made those be popular. We can make the presidency be elected by popular vote. And then we get out of all this battleground crap. We just count the votes, and this is what you get.
Yeah.
So, but again, we have that writing the Constitution is about 10 years out from the revolution, which is the next few years.
Right now. So, right. Exactly.
Right now, the revolution.
So with that said, we're having this election during the revolution. do you anticipate any surprises or anything that we want to be watching for as we move toward November as Super Tuesday?
I'm also a astrologer who does mundane astrology,
Mhm.
which is the kind where you do politics. So the president elected in a year ending in a zero usually dies in office. So that would be Biden. I was joking back when Trump was yelling. I'm like, okay, well, you should die then, because if you really won, you should be dead. But so we're going to certainly watch Biden's health. And then in 80, Gore was hung by Chads in Florida because he won Florida when they actually counted the votes. And in 2080, Reagan got shot, but he said to Nancy, honey, I forgot to duck. And John Lennon got killed. 60, of course, Kennedy. So we're watching this year ending in a zero as not being a great thing for a president's health. So that's one of my concerns. My dream ticket, if Biden doesn't show up, Kamala Harris.
I
Liz
love
Cheney.
that. Yeah.
Because Liz Cheney would do the foreign policy, she's her daddy's girl, and she's pretty good on that foreign policy stuff. And Kamala is the social activist and the, legislator and the attorney general and all those things. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We got a long way to go. We know it's going to be very exciting. Not all of us are going to be able to get passports and move to Portugal. Or I have a few clients.
I know.
How do I get my passport to Portugal? And then, well, you probably need to do it sooner rather than later because there are 330 million of us, and Europe's getting anti-immigration, so they're not going to want us coming. But we're here. We have to do something. We're in charge of our direction and how we're going to get there. So I think that's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I do keep feeling like there are surprises along the way. So so it'll be interesting.
Although I have to say, sometimes I get like when people go, who's going to win? I'm like, it is like crazy skies. And it really doesn't matter who wins because it's what because that's the other thing with astrology. The bad stuff can happen, but it's what you do with it. And that's always our choice point. So even if we don't get what we like, we go, well, I have a choice here. Maybe not moving to Portugal. But what do I want to do? What is my posture on this and think of why your soul came in now to be working on this now, because you're here for a reason. You weren't born 300 years from now. You weren't born 200 years back. You were born now. So you have a job to do on planet Earth for us, for all of us. We're all voices in the forest.
I think what you spoke to with the planet, with 5 planets changing signs just in a short period of time and just a couple of years, there's so much change that just when we catch our breath and accept one, new normal, then we're taken into a whole nother normal that we have to adjust to. So,
right.
So yeah.
So the way we handle that is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The lower part of the pyramid. When that part is unstable, we get a little freaky. So that's doing your moon. So those of you who have had an astrology reading, do your moon. If you haven't had one, go on the internet, put your chart in, look at what your moon is in, what sign it's in, and then go look those words up and do those things. So like I have a moon in Pisces. I have a swimming pool that I'm going in about 10 minutes when I'm finished with Rachel. I've been sleeping 9.5 hours because Pisces is a sleeper. I've been playing with my cat, been listening to music that I sing and dance to because Pisces is music. So you find your moon and you use that for your stability in this. And then you look at what your sun says you're here to do, and you go do your purpose, whatever it is. And that will help you deal with all this instability. And the other thing is be here now. Don't worry about it. You're here. You don't know what's going to happen. We know it's crazy time, and we'll figure it out. Because that's what we do. We're humans. We figure out things.
Yeah. Do your moon. I love that.
Do your moon. Because then you're in your bottom of your pyramid. You've stabilized your life.
My moon's Gemini. Yeah.
Okay. So you talk for a living. Yeah. Communicate, talking, reading books, having ideas.
Right.
Yeah. That makes
right.
you very,
It
very
does.
happy.
Having conversations like this, talking about politics, that is my happy place. And listening too. I love listening to. Speaking of which, Anne, I love your podcast and all of and you're just prolific. You make my Gemini moon very happy. So why don't you take a few minutes and tell everyone all of the places where they can find you?
Okay. Well, I have a website, Anne Ortelee, but I have a weird last name. So you can find me under AstroAnne with an E.com. And I do Twitter, X. I do every day. I send out what's happening now. Gets texted to you at the time it happens. And I have great stories about that. I had one woman got a text she was negotiating car, and it said, whatever's going on right now, they're lying to you. So she showed it to the guy. She got $2,000 off the car. So you get the daily aspects sent to you. I have a Facebook. I have a YouTube channel where I do a weekly weather. I teach classes, I do webinars, and I do a daily Patreon where you get an aspects for the day, a song for the day, and you get an idea of what the day's energy is going to be like. So that's that you have to pay for, but the other stuff's all free. And I, talk at different places, and like here, Rachel said, you want to talk about it? I'm like, yes, this sounds great. So, but when I learned astrology, I'm a Virgo, so I like to make things better. Some of us get a reputation for being a little critical, so I try not to be critical. I try to make it improve. But what I went was, you mean to tell me there's a user manual? We come with a user manual that's our astrology chart? And nobody told me about this until I was 40? Really? And that's what I loved about astrology. It tells you how to use your energy in a good way. And so I think everybody should learn their chart in first grade or even younger. One of my friend's kids was